Have you heard the news? There's a new Audacity, but it's trash! This was the topic doing the rounds on YouTube not too long ago, and it will shock you. Remember Audacity, the free editor you use for recording, podcasting, or converting audio files? It was nice, right? But now they're ruining it. They're trying to make it a DAW, like Cubase or Ableton, and it's trash! Okay, so in early April, a small YouTuber, Mitcheller, grabbed a half-completed development build of Audacity 4 from GitHub and recorded himself using it. Since it's not even at the alpha stage yet, he understandably struggled.
Oh, master track, that's good. Keep the master track in there. Can't click that, so no problem there. Mixer doesn't exist.
He was also under the impression that the app was now a DAW and led with that in his title. Now, about that word, DAW, which stands for Digital Audio Workstation, most use the term today to mean full music creation and production tool, which Audacity 4 most certainly is not.
I can't do drums, can I? Because there's no MIDI in here. Publish. Okay, yeah, no, that's fine.
When we saw this and read a few of the comments under the video, which ranged from, "This is terrible, what are they doing?" to, "Oh, it's going to be a DAW? That's cool," I decided a little PR work was in order, so I commented with 2 clarifications. 1, it's only half finished, and 2, it's not a DAW. We also added a simple under construction message in the development build to unconfuse newcomers. As for this video, what can I say? Let he who has not sinned cast the first stone. Sure, the author could have provided proper context in the beginning, perhaps an oversight. As for the DAW thing, well, look at it, it kinda does look like a DAW. Not to mention the creator himself was pretty cool. He pinned my comment so new viewers would see it, and made sure to spread the same message himself. Didn't change the title though, but you know what? Tantapass. This kid's okay. However, YouTube being YouTube, when an original video gets views, bottom feeders will surely follow. Here's the grift. You're a medium-sized YouTuber, and one day you see a much smaller YouTube channel getting traction on a new idea. Ooh, I want those views. Since you've more reach, if you can get in on it quickly with a punchier thumbnail and title, you could hijack the entire topic and new viewers will flock to you instead. The original was called, "Wait, Audacity's a DAW now? Let's try Audacity's a DAW now, and it's broken AF! Yeah, ramp it up, boy! Get them views!" But there are 2 awkward problems. First, that pinned comment. Oh, right, this title's completely untrue.
Audacity's like running damage control in the comments here.
How about, that's not a problem. Problem solved. Okay, second, it's gonna take time to record your own video, and you need to strike while the iron's hot, so a reaction video to the original. That's the ticket. It gives the impression you're paying the original author respect, whereas what you're really doing is just trying to rank above them in search results.
Bro, what? This guy got so many views for this. I'm kinda mad.
Better yet, reaction videos are easy. They only take a few hours to create. Just watch the original, adding no useful commentary or insight of your own.
Recording error. Oh.
Or for that matter, any kind of display of emotional, logical, or creative intelligence, and then just blast that sucker out.
It's gonna be the Scarlet.
What the hell?
It's gonna be the Scarlet.
Huh?
What? I'm doing that.
Dude, I've never seen that one before. I'm doing that. Bro, this video is fucking hilarious. I don't know if this was like the intended goal here. I wonder if I could do a video like this and people would watch it. I think it's all about the title and thumbnail.
It didn't go too well. Pity those pesky Audacity folk poisoned the well a little bit. Top comments are kind of critical. Not quite the breakthrough you were looking for. Better luck next time, Weeva Beats. Anyway, welcome to comms, making sure people know what we're doing and why, and handling misunderstandings when they occur. I will eventually do a big video about comms, especially crazy situations I've personally had to clean up throughout my career. It's just too big and frankly too fun a topic to try and squeeze in here in detail, but it is coming. Now, this Audacity DAW broken narrative wasn't so bad, but if I hadn't jumped in early, there's no way of knowing how it could have spread or mutated. But it also made me think, this might actually be a good time to talk about Audacity, right while we're in the thick of developing version 4. So I included the idea in a poll of 10 potential videos for my patrons to vote on, and it came out on top. Oh, that's actually quite a surprise. So this video is about the process of taking a much-loved audio editor, which has been around for 25 years, 5 of which have been under my leadership, and modernizing it so that it can remain relevant for decades to come. It's a very different story to my work on MuseScore Studio, which I documented a few years back. Audacity has a much larger and diverse audience, a totally different codebase, and also, when it comes to usability, very different strengths and weaknesses. I'm going to show you how we came to the decision to make this change, showcasing the research, planning, development, and design work involved. This particular transition has been the most difficult of my career, which, at its heart, has one simple master rule: don't f*** up Audacity. Dominic Mazzoni, one of the founders of Audacity, wanted it to be as easy to use as possible and studied design best practices to ensure that the basics were as straightforward as possible. You open it up, press record, and it just works. As a basic editor, Audacity was fantastic. And as it grew over the years, so too did its capabilities as well as its audience, whose needs diversified in all kinds of different directions. Requests came piling in for new features which were built as expansions on top of what was already there. After Dominic handed the project over to a new team, its expansion continued and it became ever more complex with each passing year. Now, after 20 years of this, by the time I took it over, Audacity had become a seriously massive project, and it was tricky to put any kind of plan in place because I had no real sense of who the audience was. The more people I spoke to about how they use it, the more unclear its overall purpose became. So I initiated a pretty lengthy research phase: interviews, multiple surveys, polls on social media, etc. Here's a simple breakdown of how people use Audacity, although please note that these use cases are not mutually exclusive. Around 70% of people use Audacity for simple audio editing tasks, quick recordings, converting formats, applying quick edits, etc. About 60% use Audacity for some kind of musical task, recording live music, converting stems, digitizing vinyl records, etc. Around 30% use it for some kind of production work, which includes mixing, mastering, and polishing with effects. The biggest portion of this group, which makes up somewhere between 20 to 25% of Audacity's user base, use it for voiceover work, in particular podcasting. Around 5% use it for academic purposes, like audio analysis, developing Nyquist plugins, data analysis, etc. I've left out loads of other use cases here, like creating subtitles or adding metadata and so on, so don't feel aggrieved if I've left you out. In fact, let me know in the comments how you use it. Anyway, the more digging we did, the more it became clear that Audacity was not just a simple audio editor. It was more an editor-audio production hybrid. However, some aspects of editing were very complicated, and many key production capabilities were just missing. Then there's the large audience of musicians who submitted a ton of requests for musical features like full MIDI support or virtual instrument support. It seemed possible that Audacity could eventually be a music tool, but since it was missing a lot of foundational features required for audio production, like a decent mixer or real-time processing, it didn't make sense to immediately build in that direction. So in the end, I set out the following 5-year plan. Focus on UX improvements for the most common types of editing tasks, and make it a fantastic modern audio production tool, thereby serving its existing audience, whilst opening up possibilities for newer audiences. Music tools could come a little later. Before I go any further, this is probably the right time to introduce my team. On the design side, there's Alex and Leo. The development team is made up of 5 members: Dimitri, Gabriel, Gregos, Matt, and Paul. Then there's Yana, our project manager, and our 2 quality assurance engineers, Sergey and Anton. 3 members of the MuseScore studio team also help out from time to time: Elner, Igor, and Jessica. As the head of the project, my role is to plan strategy, oversee design and communications, as well as a variety of other things I won't bore you with. Okay, with that out of the way, I want to now describe our process for assessing how intuitive Audacity 3 was to use. To understand this, we conducted a lot of user testing. During these sessions, what we found was that Audacity was easy enough to use for very basic tasks: opening files, recording your voice, playing something, fine. However, when we started setting more complex goals, its loosely structured idiosyncrasies began to really get in the way. For example, many found the process of simply moving audio from one place to another quite difficult. Part of the problem here was the way it looked. For example, to many, it wasn't visually obvious that if you copy audio and place it here, these are actually separate clips that can be independently moved. If you wanted to move this audio to the left, the way most people did it was to select a bit of nothing before it and press delete, or copy nothing and paste it if you wanted to move the audio to the right. Almost everyone we tested hadn't a clue that there was another way to move clips, which I'll discuss a little later. Another problem we noticed was how users struggled when applying multiple effects. Since effects apply destructively, meaning they transform the audio data itself, if you applied, say, 3 effects one after the other, but weren't happy with the final result, you had to undo everything and then start again. Another notable issue with Audacity was its UI. One of the top 3 requests from our users was to make the interface look nicer. Another UI issue was that Audacity was jam-packed with buttons and toggles, to the point where if you wanted to create a new feature, there was no room for it, so it had to be stored away in a place where people were unlikely to find it. And then there are these guys, the great Satan of Audacity, these 6 modes. I'll be discussing these in detail later. The most telling problem we found was that new users tended to struggle enormously with tasks we set them. It seemed that despite Audacity's massive number of downloads, a significant portion of people would open the app for the first time, struggle a lot, and then remove it and never come back. Of course, the problem with making UX improvements, no matter how well they land with new users, is that they almost always feel like negative or pointless changes to those who understood how the previous system worked. On the flip side, if you avoid change altogether, yes, you won't get so much online criticism, it's tempting to do that, but you'll keep alienating new users. Okay, so why am I talking so much about this divide between existing users and new users? Well, for me, both camps need to be treated equally. Future generations of creators can't be put in second place. Given how income inequality is increasing and educational budgets keep getting slashed, open source creation tools have the potential to provide access to creative spaces that would otherwise seem closed off. I'm constantly hearing younger creators describe how they can't participate in something artistic because they need to pay some software tax. So when the research comes back loud and clear, telling us that 1, Audacity is highly awkward to use for the inexperienced, and 2, there are a ton of needs people are asking for which it's not providing, the challenge of balancing the needs of existing and new users isn't some design abstraction, some dislocated statistic I can use to prove success. It's the fight to fight. Like, what's the point of me being here if I'm not trying to solve that exact problem? But before I get into how we addressed this challenge, there's one more core problem to discuss. For those who've seen my MuseScore video, you can probably guess what's coming next. It's the giant knife we've had stuck in our ribs right from the beginning. A knife so placed that if you simply pull it out, you'd be dead. Only by restructuring your vital organs so that they're impervious to knives could you be saved. I am, of course, talking about Audacity's incredibly monstrous and omni-miserable technical debt. Okay, where to begin here? Well, I guess I'll start by comparing Audacity's situation with MuseScore Studio. If MuseScore's technical debt was the moon, Audacity's technical debt was Jupiter. Same kind of problems, totally different scale. When Audacity began growing in popularity and more volunteer contributors added to it, over time the architecture of the app became an impossibly jumbled mess. Different parts of the codebase that should have been clearly separated were utterly entangled. I've used the example of city planning to describe this problem before, so let's riff on that idea. Audacity's codebase was like if you combined in one building with no clear sectioning or zoning, an abattoir, a kindergarten, a nightclub, and a nuclear power plant. Clubbers keep slipping on pig's blood. Kids keep finding lines of ketamine on their desks. Pigs being led to the slaughter are so freaked out by techno music that they lose their minds. And everyone's radiation levels are through the roof due to an unfortunate inability to distinguish between the swimming pool and the waste containment pool next to it. Audacity's mess was so bad that when we wanted to make a significant improvement to a feature, we had to go into kind of pre-production, a lengthy expedition to discover the various unholy ways the feature was connected across multiple dark corners of the codebase.
One of my first implementations, I modify one thing and then, I don't know, 1 month later was like I broke some other unrelated stuff. It seems that if I touch one thing, I can break a lot of different things.
Ideally, you want your architecture to be nicely segmented so different core processes live in their own place, owning their own responsibilities efficiently. When the code is all jumbled up, maintaining stability becomes incredibly difficult. Now, for open source projects, tech debt can often be much harder to avoid due to their decentralized volunteer-based nature. Audacity's technical debt was so vast that it became virtually impossible to confidently estimate how long a task might take. Something that appeared to be 1 month's work could balloon to 4 or 5. If I could give one piece of advice to the project leads of the future, it would be this. When you're told that the only way to hit a deadline is to hack something together, don't do it. A hack is like building a road through someone's house. It might work for a bit, but eventually you're going to have to build the road properly anyway, and you'll need to repair the house too. Anyway, this wasn't Audacity's only technical obstacle. The next problem was our development framework, WX Widgets, which placed serious limitations on what we could achieve. WX Widgets deserves a lot of credit for its contribution to open source software, and there are many cases where it's an appropriate choice. But for us, it made building the kind of modern interface we needed pretty much impossible. Every time we altered the UI in any way, it took a ridiculous amount of time. Over on MuseScore Studio, which uses the framework Qt, a developer could implement one of our designs in a few days, whereas with Audacity, the same thing would take weeks, and only after you've made dozens of compromises on animations, transparency, theming, shadows, decent anti-aliasing, etc. It also just looked blurry and pixelated, especially on higher resolution screens. But that's not the half of it. With Qt, when you implement UI, you're pretty much guaranteed it'll look the same on every operating system. With WX Widgets,
you start with macOS, it works, it looks okay, then you switch to Windows and it doesn't compile, so you need to fix it, and you realize that it doesn't look the same. So you need to match the UI between Windows and macOS. And then you need to go to Linux and, the story repeats.
WX widgets had to go, which meant we had to re-platform to Qt. Just about the last thing we wanted to do, because re-platforming means years of pure pain. The last major problem we faced was the really bad situation with Audacity's audio latency and real-time capabilities. Its latency is so unpredictable, it makes any kind of synchronized recordings, like singing over a backing track, highly complex and annoying. This isn't just a niche complaint, it's one of the most common frustrations voiced by our users. To fix latency and real-time playback, we needed multiple different things. A new audio I/O, that's the thing that handles how audio is sent and received from your machine. We also needed a new audio engine, a massive task. The problem though is that we knew we couldn't include these last two things in the first release of Audacity 4. It was just unfeasible. We needed to solve our tech debt problems and complete the move to Qt first. So, annoyingly, Audacity 4 will still be using the Audacity 3 playback engine. However, once version 4 is released, we'll finally be unblocked and will be able to integrate the modern playback system it really needs. This will be done step by step in subsequent releases. So based on everything I've just spoken about, let me outline our overall plan. First, build tons of new features for audio editors and audio producers. Second, remove technical debt to increase overall performance whilst allowing us to work more quickly. Third, re-platform to the development framework Qt. Fourth, make Audacity much more visually appealing and easy to use. Fifth, lay the groundwork for musical features in the future. And last, replace the audio engine and fix our latency problems. Now, many developers watching will know that an overhaul of this magnitude can't be done in one release, as was the case with MuseScore Studio. For Audacity, we needed a totally different approach, which was to gradually work towards each of these goals step by step, with each step being a new release of Audacity 3. This is what I think of as the frog boiling in water approach. Evolution rather than revolution. Instead of one mega release, we introduced our changes in logical steps, rather than totally upending people's workflows in one fell swoop. This required a very detailed long-term roadmap, including a set of designs outlining the vision for what Audacity could eventually be, along with a list of technical milestones needed to achieve each step. All in all, to tell the story of how we built Audacity 4, we first need to look at how we gradually transformed Audacity 3. Okay, starting with Audacity 3.0, right away I could see two obvious things that were in need of improvement. First, Audacity wasn't as easy to download as it should have been. When you arrived on the site, you first clicked on this download button. From there, you were taken to a new page to select your operating system, after which you'd be taken to a third page, which contained a reasonably complex list of instructions with eensy little hyperlinks to finally get the installation files. Now, this setup wasn't bad exactly, but I knew from experience that if we could reduce those steps from 3 to just 1, fewer people would be confused and we'd get more downloads. To achieve this, we changed the logic of this first download button so that it recognizes your operating system and immediately presents you with the correct installer file. The second change was more significant. Up to that point, regardless of which version of Audacity you were using, you were never informed if a new version was available. So if you were experiencing bugs, you wouldn't know if there was a fix. You'd have to go hunting online yourself. Even today, there are still untold numbers of people running versions of Audacity they installed, say, 10 years ago, who've never seen any of the changes we've made. So we included a simple system that checks for updates. If one is available, it lets you download and install it right away. This is one of the most enormously important features you could possibly build. Today, whenever a new version is released, we can tell by looking at the download figures that it takes around 4 weeks for the majority of our audience to adopt it. So if a particularly nasty bug gets released, which we're unable to detect during testing, if we can put out a patch release quickly, most people never even experience that bug. Now with Audacity 3.1, we can finally get into the meaty improvements. And what better place to start than a discussion of modes? Most people who use complex creation software will be intimately familiar with modes. Buttons you can press which change the context in some way that allows you to perform different types of operation. For example, arrow tools that let you select things, erasers that let you erase things. In Logic Pro, there's a mode you can trigger which lets you click on clips to increase or decrease gain. Modes are one of the oldest and most prevalent concepts in interface design, but what you might not know about them is that they can also be a total f***ing nightmare for usability. See, if you're using a highly complex tool like Maya or Reaper or anything created by Adobe, modes are everywhere. Professionals and the technically savvy just accept them. However, after decades of user testing, I've come to the conclusion that modes should be used very sparingly. If done well, like the metaphor of choosing between brushes in a painting app, they make sense to most people. Other times, they can be really unintuitive and can cause an app to feel far more complicated than it needs to be. I've mentioned before my experience working on Paint 3D while I was at Microsoft years ago, and I've often discussed many of the lessons I learned whilst on that project, but what I've not really communicated before is that Paint 3D was, in my opinion, a colossal failure and a total nightmare to work on. The brief we were given was that it should be both a modern replacement to MS Paint, whilst also being the world's first 3D modelling app that anyone could pick up. Unlike MuseScore Studio and Audacity, I wasn't in charge of strategy and I didn't call the shots on production. As a lead designer, my job was to try and find a way to make this Frankenstein idea intuitive for non-technical users. And the number one thing I learned after years of user testing on Paint 3D is that modes can cause bafflement like you wouldn't believe. Let me give an example. These paintbrush modes didn't cause any issues, people inherently understood that. However, when 3D objects were introduced into the mix, it produced a massive UX problem because we now had to help users distinguish between the act of selecting objects to move them around and the act of painting on those same objects. In testing, this killed us. People trying to move a sphere would accidentally draw on it. Those wanting to draw on it would accidentally move it, etc. We needed to provide a way for people to be able to achieve their intended goal without confusion. For years, we tried all kinds of approaches so users could either move objects or paint on them without first needing to state that intention by clicking on the right mode. We wanted it to just work. Eventually, we admitted defeat and introduced an arrow tool, which disabled the drawing mode. If a user wanted to move something, they clicked on the arrow, moved the thing, and then clicked back on a brush in order to start painting again. There we go. That's clearly the correct approach, right? It didn't work. All we saw time and time again was people either not realizing they had to click on the arrow tool or clicking on the arrow tool in desperation, achieving their desired result, and then suddenly finding that they couldn't draw on the canvas anymore. The moment we introduced modes, Paint 3D entered into a new tier of complexity, a problem definitely not helped by placing the different modes on opposing ends of the app. That wasn't my doing, by the way. But even so, it's embarrassing. All I can say is, too many cooks. Anyway, this experience, as well as hundreds of others like it, changed me as a designer. It was the ultimate school of hard knocks. 4 years spent trying to solve insanely difficult UX problems to achieve a moonshot ideal, conducting endless rounds of user testing on God knows how many ideas. Even though the project was ultimately a failure, it was a crash course in UX design that really helped me understand the kinds of things that tend to confuse people. And with that in mind, you'll now appreciate exactly what was going through my head when I looked at Audacity and noticed that if you had some audio and wanted to move it left or right, you first needed to enter into a special time shift mode to do so. In user testing, as I predicted, this performed abysmally every time. In fact, these 6 modes became a bit of an obsession for me. I wanted to get rid of all the unnecessary or useless ones until there was only one left, the one that deserved to stay. Try taking a guess now which one I'm talking about, and let's see if you were right by the end. Anyway, to kill the time shift mode, we changed the way clips appeared by adding these handles to them. This not only made them look like things that can be moved, you can now also just drag the clips to move them. 1 down, 4 to go. And now that clips looked and behaved like clips, we were next able to introduce non-destructive editing, which allowed you to grab the edges of clips and trim them without losing the underlying audio data, a foundational feature for production as well as a handy new way to edit clips. Unfortunately, non-destructive editing required 4 months of refactoring to achieve, something we did not anticipate, but at least it was a big step towards cleaning up the codebase. What I liked most about this was that, unlike say Audition, which has one interface for production and another for wave editing, we were able to keep everything as part of one interface, which makes it feel a lot easier to use. However, there were other limitations we couldn't address at that point. In particular, multi-selecting clips wasn't possible. Secondly, the limitations of WX widgets prevented us from adding handles to these clips to make it more obvious they could be trimmed. This meant that users had to learn to hover over the top edge of clips to trim them. Not a perfect solution, but it was a start. Then came Audacity 3.2, which to my mind was the most difficult release of the lot, mainly due to the insane technical debt we had to resolve, which we'll get to in a second. To begin, we wanted to start decluttering the UI, in particular, this mess you see up here. First, we consolidated the meters and the volume controls, 4 items became 2. Next, look at these 4 drop-downs for selecting your mic, output speaker and such. These are things you only ever need to fiddle with every once in a while, like when you get a new audio device or something. As a rule, items you rarely interact with shouldn't be in your face all the time, so we consolidated all of them into one button. Now, with fewer things on the screen, it was easier to focus and find things. We also replaced the icons, which were a little all over the place, but that's the small stuff. The majority of the development work in this release went into supporting real-time effects. Users could now apply their VST, Audio Unit or LV2 plugins non-destructively. another absolute must-have for production. To apply them, you selected this effects button on the appropriate track, which opened a panel for applying real-time effects. With this, you could now build stacks of effects and change them at any time without the underlying audio data being changed. Beyond that, we also started supporting VST3, catching up to the modern standard. Oh, and by the way, VST support is incredibly time-consuming. The technology is basically a lawless territory for cowboys to go wild. You can't just provide support for the standard and expect everything to work. What ends up happening is that you discover hundreds of popular VSTs which fail for weird, unique reasons, often requiring individual fixes. This means you have to account for every possible way a third party might choose to hack one together. Having already done this from MuseScore Studio, it was like a PTSD flashback. VST support. If you're planning on doing it, set aside a lot of time. You're going to need it. Now, an entire thesis could probably be written on the refactoring required to get real-time effects to work with Audacity, but I won't go into that. What I will say is that it took one of our developers around 4 months of solid work just to make the integration possible in the first place, before we even started building anything. But regardless, there were still some limitations imposed by our codebase that we just had to eat. The most frustrating for me is that we couldn't provide automation support, which lets you specify how effects change over time. We actually still can't do it in Audacity 4, although that's coming shortly after, and we know exactly what technical changes need to be made to achieve it. Now I feel sad. But to make us feel a little better, let's kill another mode. This time, it's the zoom button. Again, let me refer back to testing. Here's basically what we'd see people do. I want to zoom on this bit over here. Oh look, zoom. Let's click on that. Why didn't it zoom? Okay, I'll click this one. Oh, that worked. Okay, now I want to edit the audio. Oh, it's changed. It's zooming now. What's going on? How do I get it back to normal? And then, as a tester, you'd have to sit by and wait for them to realize that they have to click back on the selection mode before being able to continue. Since there are already dedicated zoom in and zoom out buttons, which lets you target selected audio precisely, as well as 3 other specific zoom actions I won't go into, this mode was pretty redundant. However, when a button exists, some people are going to use it, so getting rid of this mode wasn't a zero consequence decision. There was a little bit of disappointment and criticism voiced on our forums, but not too much. Without context, to some, I imagine it appeared as a pointless aesthetic change, but I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't a necessary step towards eliminating the confusion modes were causing. Version 3.3 was mainly dedicated to code restructuring, although there was one cool new thing we introduced, making some of Audacity's internal effects real-time capable. Now, since it's an unfathomably large task to convert all of Audacity's internal effects, we started with a few of the easier ones: bass and treble, distortion, phaser, reverb, and the wah-wah effect. Version 3.4 was the first release where we began adding musical features. First, we simplified the snapping settings down here and added a new type of unit people could snap to, divisions of the beat. To complement this, we provided an option to display beats and measures in the ruler up here too. In combination, these changes allowed people to construct music with samples or to beat match existing music for the purpose of editing, sampling, looping specific sections, etc. Of course, these features wouldn't really make sense without a way to change the time signature or tempo, so we introduced those concepts too. But when you provide those options, the next logical question is, what happens when you change the tempo? In order for it to work, the music would have to increase or decrease in speed whilst preserving the pitch, something Audacity was unable to do at that point. To solve this, I turned to the StaffPad team, who had developed an excellent time-stretching algorithm that performed really well, right up there with the best. The only problem though was that this technology was proprietary, so I had to do a bit of internal work to convince everyone that we should open source it, which we eventually did. And when we integrated that into Audacity, adding a bunch of improvements of our own, everything came together. Around the time we began working on 3.5, we also started dedicating some of our resources to prep work for the transition to Qt. From this point onwards, our releases were smaller in scope, so let's blast through them quickly. First, we introduced the ability to export labels as subtitle files in various formats. We also redesigned our plugin manager and export windows so that they were easier to use, and we introduced a new automatic tempo detection technology developed by our DSP developer, Matt. With this new technology, when you imported music, we'd recognize it and offer to synchronize it with the correct tempo and time signature settings. Incidentally, Matt gave a talk about how he created this feature at the Audio Developer Conference in 2024, which I've linked to in the description. If you're wondering why we introduced these musical features so early, it's because they're foundational. You have to have them in place before you can add any other type of musical features, and we knew that we should really have them ready before moving over to Audacity 4. Audacity 3.6 was the last major release we put out, and to do it justice, I wanted to focus back on the core audience, renewing our focus on production and effects. First off, we introduced a master channel where users could apply real-time effects on the overall mix. With this in place, I was finally able to move the audio production of my YouTube videos almost entirely over to Audacity. I'll admit that it's still not as comfortable as Logic, which I'd previously relied on, but if you want to really understand the app you're working on, you have to use it yourself as much as possible. It's hard to understand your user's pain if you're not feeling that pain yourself. Next, we introduced 2 new real-time effects, a compressor and a limiter, also created by Matt. These are super, although trying to get them to look halfway decent within the restrictions of WX widgets was, well, just look at them. Another really nice feature we introduced was done in collaboration with Intel, who I'd been talking to for quite some time up to that point. They've been developing an open source AI tool called OpenVino, which, when integrated with Audacity, allows people to run various open source AI models locally on their machine. This opened us up to some really nice features, my favourite being the noise reduction tool, which can produce mind-blowing results. We're still working with Intel now on improving the pipeline so people can access new models as they come out. The only sticking point for me is that OpenVino supports 1 or 2 models I suspect might be unethically trained that were created by Meta. Now, I don't have much say on what OpenVino supports or doesn't support, so what I'll just say is this: I'd strongly recommend never using anything created by Meta. The last thing we did in this release was to give Audacity a little visual touch-up, focusing on the things we could change reasonably easily, to help it look just a little bit more modern and pleasing on the eye. Audacity 3.7 marks the point where the majority of our team were now working on the Qt migration, helped by a few developers from MuseScore Studio who provided a lot of help, especially early on. We're still putting out minor releases of 3.7 every few months. With each of these releases, we include bug fixes as well as a few small improvements. I should acknowledge at this point the incredible help that some of our community members have provided since I first joined the project. In particular, 4 names stand out: Peter Sampson, Steve Dalton, Paul Leccamelli, and David Bales. These members tirelessly contributed to the project, always advocating on behalf of the user to temper our changes and ensuring that things like accessibility for new features were never overlooked. Our plan is to continue putting out minor releases of 3.7 up to and beyond the release of Audacity 4, which it's now finally time to discuss. Anyone who's worked on popular software will be intimately familiar with what I'm going to call the new user versus old user conundrum. It goes like this. You, the software developer, become aware that an important feature is not up to scratch and needs to be significantly improved. The problem is, if you change the feature, you'll frustrate a large number of existing users who've become accustomed to the original version. However, if you don't make the change, you'll repel new users who've no idea how the original version works because it's too complex or incomplete, and will simply give up and go somewhere else. Now, when thinking about this problem, it's really important to understand that defaults are everything. Let me explain. Whenever I put out polls on social media to help us determine what the default behavior for a feature should be, I usually get a few comments implying that I'm creating a false choice, that I shouldn't pick one solution over another and should instead provide both options in the app's preferences. The problem with this is that only a very small percentage of people ever go looking through preferences to customize their setup. Most people simply accept whatever defaults you give them, and therefore, if you make a change to a default, almost everyone, old and new users alike, will be affected by it. Your default behavior is, for most people, your only behavior. So, when it comes to changing a long-standing default, you're screwed either way. If you change the default, you've prioritized new users at the expense of existing ones. If you hide the change in preferences, no one will see it, and you've just wasted your time. Now, with an app like Audacity that's been around for 25 years, with tens of millions of users, making changes to default behavior is a dangerous business. When you do decide to make a change, it's really hard to communicate why you've done it. Most of our users don't read our handbook, don't watch our YouTube channel, and won't read release notes either. And I don't blame them. Life is busy enough. New users, on the other hand, are a blank slate. You can give them whatever research tells you is the most intuitive solution. So with all that said, when we started designing Audacity 4, I wanted to tackle this old versus new user conundrum head on. The solution we came up with involves a few different component parts, which I'll describe piece by piece before tying it all together at the end. Let's start with the UI. One of the immediate advantages of moving to Qt was that we could reuse the UI that I and my other team over on MuseScore Studio had spent years building, which probably saved the Audacity team about a year of development time. With this framework in place, we were able to make the interface highly customizable and flexible. It has light and dark themes with different accent colors to choose from. There's also a customizable high contrast mode to cater to those with various different types of visual impairment, like low vision, poor contrast perception, or color blindness. Next, the appearance of clips. When I first showed this multicolored design on social media, it got a really good reception, although a few people mentioned that it felt too different to version 3, too alien. So we included an option that looks closer to the classic version. Next, we reused a popular feature I designed for MuseScore 4, a button that lets you discover available features and choose which you'd like to appear in the top bar. If you only want buttons for copying, pasting and zooming, but nothing else, you can have that. If you want to see snapping, time signature and tempo, you can have that too. We also made this top bar dockable so people can place it at the top or the bottom of the app or detach it entirely. Next, we expanded the flexibility of metering. For the first time, tracks now have their own meters, which double to show you your mic levels when recording. Then there's the main output meter, which, like Audacity 3, can be horizontally resized. However, we went one step further by also providing a vertical version, something we've been asked for years. Anyway, you get the idea. We made the app really flexible. But of course, that doesn't solve the problem of what the default layout should be. In order to address this, we needed to introduce a new mechanism: workspaces. This system works as you'd expect, a way to store and switch between different configurations of the layout. You can choose from presets we provide or create your own. And with all of this built, we now had all the pieces needed to finally address the problem of what the defaults should be. It's actually really simple. When the app first launches, we ask 3 simple questions. First, what theme would you like? Second, do you want multicolored clips or classic clips? And third, how do you want the UI to be arranged? Do you want the classic view, which closely matches the layout of Audacity 3, or do you want the modern view instead? Depending on your answers to these 3 questions, Audacity could be arranged like this, or it could look like this, or something in between. Not only does this allow new and old users to choose the layout that makes the most sense to them, it also makes Audacity hyper-scalable for the future too. For example, imagine we decided to add a piano roll at some point. Using this new system, we could introduce that feature without bothering anyone. All we need to do is introduce a music workspace along with a new option for musicians in our onboarding too. Musicians would then have a much more recognizable layout. The ruler would display beats and measures. Features like tempo, metronome and time signature would appear in the top bar too. Now, even though none of these individual ideas are our innovation, it did take quite a while to work it all out perfectly, and the end result is something I'm rather proud of. Okay, so let's stop talking about UI and let's now look at productivity improvements. In particular, the improvements we made to the core editing experience. The biggest UX problem we wanted to overcome with this version is what we call Audacity says no. For example, in version 3, if you want to drag a clip past another clip, it hits it like a brick wall. No. If you copy a clip and try to paste it where there's not enough blank runway, no, you don't have enough room. If you want to select multiple clips, no. You get the idea. Another problem was how undiscoverable our trimming and time stretching features were. As I mentioned earlier, you had to hover over the top edge of a clip to discover the trimming feature. Worse, if you wanted to time stretch a clip, you had to hover over the same space and then hold down the Alt key. Really undiscoverable. To fix all of this, we had to rebuild the entire clip system from scratch to make it more flexible. You can now move clips wherever you want without being blocked. You can paste clips wherever you want too. If you accidentally trim a clip and want the missing part back, just click on it and using these new handles, untrim it back to its original position. If you want to time stretch a clip, you can do so by dragging this handle instead. Better yet, you can now multi-select clips. This means multiple clips can be moved together or time stretched at the same time or trimmed by the same amount. Then there's looping. We were never happy with the looping solution in Audacity 3 because it kinda clashed with the playhead. In Audacity 4, we added a dedicated space for it, which matches modern convention. This helped us fix another problem with Audacity, which was that when you exported an audio file, it contained everything from the very start of your project right up to the moment the last clip ends. This meant that things like reverb trails occurring after the last clip would suddenly get cut off. Now, you have the option of exporting only the stuff contained within the loop, which means that if you extend the loop mechanism beyond the last clip, trailing effects will be included in your audio file. This next part is one of the most awkward aspects of the redesign, because it's the one case where we decided to completely replace a feature, a decision that will, for a time, annoy some users of Audacity 3, although I hope my explanation here will help those users understand why the change wasn't just necessary, but also a major improvement. The feature in question is called Sync Lock, a bizarre and from a usability point of view, highly bespoke feature.
Sync Lock in Audacity 3, which was maybe not an optimally designed feature, and that was also hard to maintain in the Audacity 3 code base.
The purpose of Sync Lock is to allow users to keep multiple tracks synchronized while making edits, a vitally important capability. However, in testing, Sync Lock performed terribly and was completely incomprehensible to new users. Let me show you. First, you enable the feature by going to Tracks and choosing Keep Track Synchronized. Once turned on, these clock symbols appear in your track so you know it's enabled. Sync Lock does a few different things. The first is that it groups clips together, but in a really weird way. The rule is that when clips overlap, they're automatically grouped together, so if I drag this one over here so that it's overlapping these clips, if I now move one, the others move too. But this is inherently limited because if a clip isn't overlapping, it won't be grouped, and sometimes you might want it to be. And there isn't really any good solution for solving this that isn't a horrible hack. The next problem is that as you move clips around, you can end up unintentionally grouping them with others. Oh, blast, I didn't mean to do that. So what do? Well, there's a kind of solution for this, which is really strange. In order to stop, say, these clips here from being grouped with these clips, you need to create a label track and place it between them. This label track now acts as a kind of protective force field which stops the clips on either side of it from being grouped. See? Now they can move independently. It's insane. But that's not all SyncLock does. It's also used as a solution for what some call ripple editing, something that allows your entire timeline to remain synchronized so clips don't move out of position. To demonstrate, if you make a selection here and press delete, you can now see that all the clips on all the other tracks have moved backwards by that same amount, keeping them synchronized. That is, unless I place a label track between them, then they're not synchronized. Oh god, how is this the solution? Apart from being highly complicated, undiscoverable, and fundamentally incomplete, SyncLock was also a major technical blocker for us too, a totally different mode that broke whenever we made improvements elsewhere. This was the one case where we decided that an outright replacement was warranted. We wanted something much more powerful and in line with how ripple editing works in more modern applications. So to replace SyncLock completely, we needed to introduce two new features. The first, made possible by being able to multi-select clips at the same time, was a proper grouping system. You select your clips, click on this button or right-click on the clips to bring up a secondary menu and then choose Group Clips. Now you can group whatever clips you want across however many tracks you want. Next, we provided two new ripple editing features. This means that if I select some audio and, on Mac, press Shift and Delete, all the clips on the selected track move backwards, maintaining their relative distance from each other. Or I can press Command and Delete, which moves all the clips on all tracks backwards by the same amount, maintaining complete synchronization. All in all, even though this is a much more complete system, it's also very different to SyncLock, and it will take a little time for existing users to become accustomed to it. In fact, one of the reasons I've gone into so much detail about it here is to provide a little tutorial on how it all works to ease their pain. Next, I want to discuss what is probably the biggest interaction problem in Audacity, which in some ways is related to SyncLock. Simply put, what do you think should happen when you select a part of a clip and press delete? Take a moment to ponder. Ready? Okay, from extensive research on this topic, we found that roughly 2/3 of people expected deletion to leave a gap. However, about 1/3 of people expected deletion to close the gap, bringing all other clips on the same track backwards. With such a massive split in user expectation, choosing one default over another meant overlooking the preferences of literally millions of people. To fix this, we created a unique onboarding question. When you first use the app and try to delete something, this flyout appears, asking you to choose the delete behavior you want as your default. We also included little animations to make the options as clear as possible, and when you've made your choice, we also take the opportunity to tell you about all the new shortcuts that exist for the other delete behaviors I described earlier. We'll be user testing this entire system quite soon, and I'm really curious to find out how it performs. By the way, this pop-up only appears once, so if you want to choose a different delete behavior, you can do so in the app preferences. One of the hard parts about making a video like this is the amount of stuff I have to exclude. However, I wanted to just spend a minute discussing our work on small details, little quality of life improvements which are scattered everywhere. For example, when porting over Audacity's native effects, each one received a redesign to make the layout easier to understand, and along the way, plugin by plugin, we often found nice little interaction wins. Take the graphic equalizer. In version 3, it was a bit hard to read because these frequency values were too close together. There's also no value on the left-hand side to indicate the number of decibels you are increasing or decreasing a frequency by when you drag a slider. In our new version, overall legibility is improved and there are now decibel values on the left, with corresponding horizontal lines for reference. Better yet, when dragging an individual slider, we added a little pop-up to provide precise detail. And if you drag your mouse across the equalizer, you can quickly set multiple values at the same time. We also made the presets easier to find. In version 3, they're hidden away in a menu triggered from this button. In version 4, they're immediately discoverable up here. There are tons of other simple interaction improvements strewn all over the app. For example, this little button that allows you to quickly add a track or multiple tracks really quickly. In this way, you can hold a new user's hand whilst generally speeding things up for everyone else. I'd love to go through the hundreds of other mini improvements we've made, but I'll spare you. Let's move on. Now, I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I'd put all my money on the bet that this next topic will be the most talked about in the comments section. Audacity's branding. When I first took over the project, I put out a video that touched on this topic, with particular focus on the logo, which is iconic. However, I don't think I'm off the mark to suggest that most would also consider it dated. I also kind of felt it to be a bit crude too. We did make a couple of minor changes to it over the years, but always felt that at some point we need to update it. Now, the problem with rebrands is that no matter how nice they are, something is always lost. I won't expand on this now because it's a complex topic and I'm confident you all have your own personal sense of what that loss is. The rebrand for Audacity was actually completed in 2024 when Muse hired an external agency to take a look at all the products it maintains. My own involvement was somewhat limited, although I did steer it away from a few ideas I felt were going too far. The one thing I insisted on though was that we had to pay homage to the headphone iconography. So when you look at the new logo next to the other Muse icons, there's a general sense of playfulness going on. Once the initial version was done, the icon was then handed over to us where we engaged in some meat and potato work on overall branding, making sure it felt right inside the app itself. This finesse work was largely done by longtime friend of the channel, making her third appearance here, Jessica Williamson. I particularly like her work on her new loading screen, which has a nice feeling of energy to it. Now, I'm sure you've all witnessed the mania that sometimes springs up when popular logos are simplified and revealed to the public for the first time. For me as a designer, I've never had an issue with simplification. I take each rebrand as they come. Sometimes simplified rebrands are lifeless or overly austere or just clumsy. Other times, I think they're lovely. With this rebrand, I am curious what you think. Speaking for myself, I don't really have a strong opinion, mainly because I've watched it slowly develop, iteration after iteration over a long period of time, and I can't see it with fresh eyes anymore. What I can say is that I haven't yet developed an emotional attachment to it yet. I still see the old logo every day when working in Audacity, and I guess I've come to associate it with my own personal work. I can only imagine that when I begin working properly in Audacity 4, I'll develop an attachment to the new branding. That aside, the one thing I'm glad I can do is at least present it to you without any tiresome corporate nonsense, explaining the hidden esoteric concepts that are supposedly folded into it. You can't talk a design into being good, it just needs to feel right. So here it is. I'm showcasing it here now because I'm curious what your reaction will be, and also because I find the idea of hiding branding until launch rather silly. Audacity is a community project at heart, so the community should have their chance to comment. Okay, we're getting towards the end now, but before we sign off, I can't not mention where we got to with modes. As I described earlier, in Audacity 3, we managed to get the number of modes down from 6 to 4, but there were 3 more I wanted to get rid of. So let's meet the remaining modes. First, there's the selection mode, what you could call normal mode, which allows you to select, copy, delete, etc. Then there's the draw mode. It's a bit weird because if you select it and try to draw on a clip, you get this Audacity says no pop-up. Why? Well, because the pen tool only works when you're super zoomed in right up to the sample level where it can be used to make corrections to individual samples. Useful sometimes for things like click removal. Next there's the envelope mode, which allows you to automate gain, although the UI for this is quite unusual. And last, there's the multi-tool mode, which is all the modes turned on all at the same time. Now, when I first saw the multi-tool mode, my immediate thought was, if it's possible for this mode to exist, then it's also possible for the app to work without any modes at all. So here's what we did. First, the pen tool. This one was easy. It now just automatically works whenever you're zoomed in at the sample level. All you have to do is hover near a sample and your cursor will turn into a pen. Voila! Thankfully, once we removed the pen mode, there were no longer any situations where you couldn't select audio, which of course meant that we no longer needed the selection mode either. Next, the envelope mode. This is the one we kept, although we changed it to an on-off toggle and simplified the UI. And lastly, the multi-tool mode. Since the other unnecessary modes are now gone, it no longer serves a purpose and automatically disappears. Mission complete. At least until I decided to add a mode. That's right, I believe in nothing. Okay, let me explain. Imagine you're editing something like a podcast. In this situation, you often find yourself needing to chop out parts of your recording, silences, mistakes, etc. It's a fundamental aspect of audio editing and production. In Audacity 3, every time you want to do this, you have to place the cursor first, then right-click to bring up a menu, then choose Split Clip, then do the same 3 clicks on the other side of the part you want to chop out. This was far too time-consuming, which is why a split tool is one of our most requested features. As I said earlier, modes should only be resorted to when they provide utility and are easy to use. And in this particular case, we determined that split tools are already a pretty well understood convention. With our version, it works in a few different ways. The simplest is to click on the split button, which turns your cursor into a scissors icon, allowing you to chop up a clip quickly. But we added a few nice features on top of this. First, you can temporarily trigger the mode by holding down the S key. While held down, you can chop up your clip until you're happy, then simply release the S key and you'll return back to normal. Another thing you can do when the tool is activated is drag from left to right, which lets you cut a hole in the clip quickly. Lastly, if you hold down the Shift key, you can see the split line extending across all tracks, allowing you to make one big split with a single click. In this particular case, practicality trumped idealism, leaving us with a final tally of 2 modes. Okay, so after all of this, I suppose you're wondering when this version of Audacity will be released. The answer, you might be surprised to learn, is 2026. Why?
We just have a lot of work every single day, and every single day is the moment when we have to decide, like, what's more important now? Do we want to deliver yet another feature that people are going to be using, or do we want to improve stability so people would be using everything more smoothly?
Because there's still a mountain of work to do. At the time of writing, there are still major parts of the app to port over from version 3. In particular, the spectrogram feature, the export process, macros, label tracks, a ton of native effects. Beyond that, we're also investing a lot in maintaining stability by including automated testing for the first time.
Basically what it is that you create a JavaScript file with steps written within it, then you send it to Audacity. Audacity performs all of those steps and then returns you a result, whether or not something has been done correctly, which basically frees up a lot of time for the QA team to work on better test cases, better test plans for new features and for old features. It eliminates some of the human mistakes that can happen. It just does what it needs to do, and then it shows you where something was broken, which is really cool.
By building up an automated testing system, we can gradually eliminate this uncertainty and achieve an ever higher level of stability in future releases. However, moving to a totally new development environment along with a completely new interface is seriously tricky business because it necessarily throws away thousands of tweaks and patches that were developed over the decades to hold Audacity 3 together. This means we'll have to do extensive alpha and beta testing before putting the final product out. For those interested, you can look forward to our alpha build in early November. The thing is though, once 4.0 is out, we never intend on making a change this significant again. From this point onwards, our progress will be surgical and focused, no longer burdened by enormous amounts of technical debt. We'll be able to make changes and improvements at roughly twice the speed we were capable of in version 3. The one unknown at this point is whether we'll need to delay any features for the first release, which we'd reintroduce in minor releases throughout the following months. If I was to bet, I'd say the most likely candidates for delay are a few of the less popular native effects, but even if that does happen, it won't take long for us to reintroduce them. If this is the route we take, we may alter the website to temporarily promote version 3 and version 4 together until we've achieved complete parity. The final step, once version 4 is fully adopted, is to then replace the audio engine. That will be version 5. And once that's out, Audacity will have become a fully modern, real-time audio app capable of anything. No more tech debt, way more easy for people to contribute to, and it will have its life extended by decades. From that point onwards, the sky's the limit.
If you like my diatribe, subscribe!